Hello and welcome to England Cricket on 99.94. Cricket every day. I'm Daniel Norcross from BBC Test Match Special, Zero Ducks Given and various other outlets. And I am joined, as I am so very often and to my great delight, by the puff pastry hangman himself. He is the chief cricket writer of the Press Association. He's had nothing to write about 4 weeks. It's Rory Dollard.
Hello there, Daniel. You look a bit like a Sherpa, if I might say.
Yes. Well, I've taken to wearing a poncho.
Right.
Because it's cold out there. And, do you know, ponchos are really good. And at the moment, they seem to be worn only by women. But back in the day...
And Sherpas.
They used to be worn... And Sherpas, yes. Yes, indeed. But you don't get too many Sherpas in Tooting. I think our
Just the one, by the looks of it.
It's about 150 feet, our highest peak. But I was always been a big fan of Clint Eastwood, and I thought he carried off a poncho really well. And I have so much in common with Clint Eastwood, as you can tell.
Yeah, a man famous for not saying very much and measuring every word carefully.
Yeah, that's me, isn't it? To a nutshell, yeah. Or even in. There you go. Proof, if proof be need be. So yes, it's a poncho for the cold. What are we going to talk about today? Well, not a lot has been happening in English cricket as such, but we are going to go over the well-worn topic of the mankad, because England are starting to feel like a little bit of an outlier in the way that they react to it happening. Certainly other countries have got a bit more on board with it, and in England it's still a massive taboo. We're also going to take a look at English players, international and non-international, who have been flourishing around the various T20 leagues that have really done for international cricket at the moment. We're all looking at South Africa and the UAE and barely even noticing that the Big Bash is going on, for that matter. And then finally, some familiar faces from England's #1 Test side back in the early part of the 2010s are back in the Backroom staff. We can have a look at that and what that may presage for the year ahead. England Cricket on 99.94 is your new home for England cricket content. We'll be dropping into your podcast feed and on YouTube or the 99.94 app several times every week. So please do rate, review and subscribe. Thank you for joining Cricket's Conversation. Rory, I'm very hesitant when you mention the mankad. Firstly, I want to get something out of the way immediately. A lot of people get very upset about it being called the mankad, and they're almost always the people who are actually entirely in favour of running people out at the non-striker's end. So I think there's a cognitive dissonance there, which they don't seem to understand. I personally don't have a problem with a run out at the non-striker's end, and therefore I'm perfectly happy with it being called a mankad, especially since when he did it, he was praised by his opponents and in the newspapers at the time, in 1947, wasn't it? 48, 49, around then, when he ran out Bill Brown, and who was the man who he ran out, was accused of trying to steal a run, and that Vinu Mankad had done exactly the right thing. Well, I think it's exactly the right thing, and so I'm happy to call it the mankad. I want to get that out of the way to start with. If you want to choose some really weird, abstruse term to describe being run out at the non-striker's end without releasing the ball as you come into bowl before your arm reaches the vertical, then please feel free to do so.
This is going to do mad numbers on socials, isn't it?
Very possibly. But the reason we're talking about it is not to go through the rights and wrongs of running people out at the non-striker's end per se, but to look at how it's being viewed in English cricket and whether English cricket has become a bit of an outlier. I've done a few podcasts on this, and you find that every ex-England player, I've done one with Graeme Swann, who we'll talk about later, done one with Stephen Finn recently. I've been on Test Match Special many times with people talking about this, and every former England player, pretty much almost to a man and woman, are outraged by it. It is something that lacks skill, it's sneaky, it's wrong. But this is not the way it's being perceived around the world. And the reason you wanted to raise this is because we're seeing increasing examples of it happening, are we not?
It's gone mainstream. Mankadding is mainstream. It's been a slow burn, hasn't it? 70 odd years, but it's gone mainstream. I mean, listen, first things first, I have to be absolutely honest. The strata of people who think that that running out at the non-striker's end, mankadding, is an act of wit and genius, and should be not only accepted but like wildly applauded, as though it were a perfectly executed googly. I wish I cared about anything in my life as much as those people care about mankads and love them. I love my kids. I love them. But I don't think I love them as much as those people love to see a mankad. And I think that's wrong, because I tell you what I think. I think that the running out at the non-striker's end, the mankad, is not something that should be cheered into the game as a new and exciting tactical dimension, as some would have you believe. It should be a thing that necessarily makes itself extinct. The idea of this going mainstream and the mankad being seen more and more and more is that it'll stop happening. Batters will stop leaving their crease so early, stop taking the extra yard. So hopefully, my hope for this weird little chapter is that it becomes self-eliminating, and that what happens is that we just stop. We've seen a huge uptick in the last. I mean, I reckon in the last, since Charlie Dean, basically at Lord's, I can think of 6 or 7 incidents of this. And I mean, how long did it take to rack up the previous 6 or 7? 10 years?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm with you on everything you've just said there. I don't see it as an act of genius. I don't see it as an act of wit. I did actually, in the case of Adam Zampa, think that it was quite cleverly used at one point, even though unfortunately he failed to affect
Not cleverly
it properly.
enough, yeah.
No, but the principle there, I think, was that's where I quite liked to see the mankad, because there were 2 balls left, there were 4 wickets remaining. He wasn't trying to get that batter out. In the case of Charlie Dean, there was how are we going to win the game, which is a very different kind of motivation.
Oh dear.
Excuse me. Yeah, it's winter. But in the case of Zampa, with 2 balls remaining in the innings, the guy was out of his crease, trying to get back for 2, so that the more experienced batter would be on strike for that ball if it didn't go for a boundary, and therefore the final ball. And so what he was trying to do was just basically stop that from happening. And that seems to me to be the perfect application, really, of the mankad. Now, people have done to death what needs to be done to stop it, as if this needs to stop rather than batters need to remain behind the line. And that'll be up for the MCC and I dare say the ICC to decide as well. They're going to get their heads together. There's no way this situation will continue because the powers that be hate it. So there will be a rewriting of the law. I have no idea which way it will go. I could speculate, but we'd be here all day.
Yeah.
Let's see.
But
how
you
that
are
happens.
right.
But
What I wanted to talk about was England, really. You're right. Because
that's what I mean. And so the question I want to ask you is why?
It's going to become
why
a
is
huge thing at the Women's T20 World Cup, isn't it? Because what we've seen at the Big Bash, and then it's bled through into the women's under 19s. It feels like we're going to see some more, and there's not going to be time to make a little tinker of the rule book before this. And as you said, it looks like England are going to line up on one side of the fence, and they might be on their own, because Heather Knight made it really, really clear in the aftermath of the Charlie Dean, Dipti Sharma incident at Lord's that it was not for her. She didn't agree with it, and she would not be pursuing anything of the sort when she was captaining on the field. I recently spoke to John Lewis, new head coach of the England women's team, and he had a couple of interesting things to say about it. One was that he said, that's Heather's call on the field, and I certainly won't be giving a policy on this, but I'm pretty sure what she thinks about it. And the other thing he said is he didn't think it was a particularly enjoyable, entertaining, inspirational, exciting way to present the game. And I agree with that. And he also said, as a result of this, I'll be telling all of my batters to keep their bloody bats behind the line and watch the bowler, because I don't want to be involved in this conversation.
Well, that is obviously the solution. It may mean that there'll be the occasional 2 that doesn't get scored. That's for sure. I guess just before we finish on this topic, I just want to ask you, why do you think that it is so sacrilegious in England? And I ask this as somebody who is, British, lived all my life here. I have some idea, but I find it kind of fascinating that the country which I've been brought up in is so incredibly infuriated by it in a way that other countries really are not. What's going on with our psyche?
Well, the answer, you only need to look at Twitter very, very quickly when one of these things happen to find out that one perception of it is that it is a colonial hangover and that we're all somehow channeling some historic addiction to this nebulous idea of spirit of cricket. I mean, that could be true, and it certainly isn't for me or you to say that's not true, because we're on the wrong side of that. We're on the wrong side of it to say that that is or isn't true. What I do think is it's a question of being brought up. I think people who are against it in 2023 are just remembering what they were taught, and we were taught to back up, and as bowling we were taught to give a warning. I think it's just people are remembering what they were told they had to do. I do think it probably lies with, primarily the batters, but it lies with probably a little rewrite of the law, because it seems a bit chaotic. I don't think at a time when cricket needs to be seen in its best light, needs to be pushing for eyes and ears, I don't think this is the mass market sell that some would have you believe, that people not bowling is more exciting than people bowling. Don't agree with that.
And I think one of the great things to come out of this, one of the great surprises perhaps for some people, would be that it is far more prevalent in the women's game. The world record holder for mankading in a single game is a woman called Maeve Doomer, of course, who did 4 in one match for Cameroon in a match that her side still lost by 160 runs. So I think it's marvellous that the women's game is flying the flag for controversy. I will be fascinated to see if England resist the urge to bring out the mankad when they play against India. I'm not going to name any players, but I've spoken to a lot of them, and there's a strong desire for Harmanpreet Kaur and Dipti Sharma to receive their comeuppance, but I don't think they're going to get it by the sounds of it, or their comeuppance as they see it. But I don't think they're going to get it because John Lewis ain't going to like it.
Well, I don't think Heather Knight's going to. I think Heather Knight is in charge, and she would have to do a big old reverse ferret to sort of see that one through. But let's see.
Well, indeed, let's see. Anyway, it's time for our first short break. After that, we'll be talking about the England men's diaspora into T20 leagues.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
Welcome back. Well, they're pretty much everywhere, England players, all over the world. None of them in England, none of them playing 4-day cricket, but they are in South Africa. There's a couple left in Australia. Most of them have skedaddled in order to find the money. In the UAE, there might even be 1 or 2 in Bangladesh for the Bangladesh Premier League. I'm not 100% certain, but when I saw that Gus Atkinson, the Surrey fast bowler, who is a very fine county bowler, but really far from a household name, was plying his trade yesterday in the UAE, and I saw that there was a league there that had 9 overseas players. I mean, this is magnificent for supplementing the bank accounts of English qualified players, but they're everywhere. How are they getting on, Rory? Have we got any standout performances from any of the England players?
Well, I'm not going to pull any surprises out of the hat by saying that the single performance or the single performer that is attracting eyeballs is Jofra Archer, because it's been so long since we've seen him that that I think he's drawn more eyes to the SA T20 than almost anyone probably, certainly in this country. People are watching it and they just want to see, is that guy as good as I remembered? And he's had a really, really encouraging start. So he started really nicely in the first match, was up to 90 right away, moving the ball, bowling a difficult length. It was relax, everything's cool. Second game, he went 0 for 31, didn't bowl his 4 overs. You think, yeah, okay, it's T20, these things happen. And then his third game, because they are parcelling him out, he's not going to play every game by any means in the tournament. He's on kind of a strict programme. But that was yesterday I saw a guy who is really worth being excited about again. And there shouldn't be any surprise about that. But he bowled 4 overs, 1 for 18, took a run out, took a catch, looked like he was having an absolute ball. Like, when Archer got the run out, he was pumping. This isn't I don't know, it should be his tentative little steps. Just seeing what he can do, pushing a little bit, 5% more each time maybe. And he was pumping around. He was, looking for a real quick release, get someone, celebrating massively, taking a tough catch in the deep, getting through his 4 overs. He looks like he's having a huge amount of fun. And Jofra Archer having fun with cricket, sign me up. Because, his England career, short and brief though it really was before this injury problem started, had started to look a bit of a drag, hadn't it? It had started to look like work. And Jofra Archer, when he first arrived on the scene, was fun. And I think maybe this time out has reignited that little spark in him. And Jofra Archer, this has been a good little dalliance with the South African franchise tournament in Cape Town for him. It's been really positive. Other people, Ollie Stone's done really well. Ollie Stone is, same team, and actually he could be someone who maybe is a little more interesting to England than we might have thought, because Jamie Overton has become the latest stress fracturee. Quite a few of them. It's almost like you're not really an England fast bowler until you've had a stress fracture over the back at the moment.
Or two normally, I think.
Yeah, but he was last summer the next cab off the rank for that sort of extreme pace option. With Mark Wood injured, with Jofra injured, Jamie Overton was drafted in, and he's now been taken off the table. And with the Ashes being as congested as it is, it doesn't feel like a massive surprise if we saw something of Ollie Stone. So he's done really well. Sam Curran, don't know, since he got that mega record IPL deal, he's struggled a bit in the SA. He struggled to find his way, really, because he's suddenly not the surprise package. And I think some of his success was that maybe when he was batting, they weren't sure, was he a bowling all-rounder coming to the crease? Then when he was bowling, was he someone they should be getting after? I think he really, really strongly overperformed. And I think he's got a different challenge now, which is he's going to go to the IPL with a huge expectation on him. And he's had a little struggle. And that's interesting because maybe Sam Curran hasn't always been seen as a bowler and a batter for all situations and all seasons. There's been times when he's more useful than others. But when you have a price tag like that and you have a performance like he had in the World Cup, expectations rise quite a lot. If we were looking a bit wider, James Vince continues to excel when he goes to these tournaments. He's in the IL in the UAE. He's top run scorer as we speak in the tournament. He just really seems to be able to tap into quite a reliable, persistent scorer. I don't think it's going to help him a great deal in the short term with England because the queue's pretty big. Alex Hales is just behind him, a couple of runs behind him, and he's forced his way back in. And then we have Rian Ahmed. And I think what I was saying about Jofra Archer being fun, Rian Ahmed's going to be tons of fun. And I think the next time we see him in an England shirt will be in a coloured shirt and with a white ball in his hand. And he's been opening the batting and ripping through his variations. So it's been, listen, there's not been a lot of England cricket to get your teeth into, but the circus never stops and you don't have to look too far before you find something of interest.
Inevitably because of who I am, but also because I think it is relevant. There are two Surrey players I want to talk about having contrasting fortunes with the bat. There's a third as well. Ollie Pope's actually playing some T20 cricket at last, and he's actually a highly capable white ball cricketer. He's got a lot of little tricks and flicks. It's lovely to see him getting a chance with the white ball. But the two I really want to talk about are Jason Roy and Will Jacks, for very contrasting reasons. Because Will Jacks has actually started with a real bang in South Africa. He's had a couple of wonderful knocks. He was unlucky not to get 100 the other day at 92, I think it was. Broke the back of a chase yesterday. He had a very rapid 30-odd in 10 or 11 balls. He looks in magnificent touch. But we're sort of looking at him and then contrasting him with Jason Roy, because Jason Roy is now back on the park playing plenty of cricket. And when we last really saw him regularly, it was towards the back end of the English summer. And he just looked like a man who was groping for the ball. I mean, he was miles away from it. It was a rather sad sight, because it's not the Jason Roy that we know, one of the most magnificent white ball cricketers that England's produced, certainly at the top of the order. And yet he suddenly looked like a man who didn't know where the ball was. Now, from what you've seen, is any of that fluency starting to come back? Or is it a binary thing? Is he just going to have to click in and have an innings? Because I've not yet seen him really dominate again. I've seen him sort of like make tentative steps, the odd 30 here and there, but it's not quite happening yet.
It's not. I would agree with that. I think it's a difficult one for Jason Roy because the way that he asserted himself on international cricket was being alpha. It was swinging hard, coming at you, chest puffed out, and dominate is the right word. He was a dominant batsman, and he didn't dig in and stick in and weasel you across a difficult pitch to a par score. He was fifth gear, full of energy, and he looks to have lost that spark at the moment. It doesn't, even when he gets a few, and it is just a few at the moment, he doesn't look to be in complete control of it. It's a fight. Cricket seems like a fight, and anyone who's played cricket at any level, including in the back garden, knows when it's a fight. Like, you just think, this bit of wood's too small. How is it possible? And it feels like his time is short to get back to it, just because, not because there's any lack of belief or lack of credit in the bank for him. There's not. He's got tons of credit in the bank. It's just the queue is long and boisterous.
And Will Jacks, his Surrey teammate, is now powering himself up near the top of that queue. As a magnificent segue into our third and final section, I'm just going to make a little suggestion. Brendan McCullum, been absolutely marvellous around the Test team. But do you think he could just pop in for a couple of sessions with some of these white ball guys? Because if he can do what he does to the Test team, maybe what Jason Roy needs is an afternoon with Brendan McCullum. Anyway, now it's time for our final break. After that, we're going to be talking about England's backroom staff. There's a couple of additions. Let's take a look at them.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
Welcome back. So, yes, I said we've got a couple of guys from England's mighty number one Test side in the world back in 2011-12 who are going to be hooking up with the England Lions. Tell us more, Rory.
Yeah, well, they are the same ones who did so before Christmas when they had the sort of the warm weather camp in the UAE, and it's Ian Bell and Graeme Swann. Now, for Ian Bell, that's kind of straightforward. I mean, he's a 5 times Ashes winner, isn't he? I think he's a player with huge pedigree, technical understanding at his fingertips. So really, really solid. Appears to be interested in coaching. That all seems pretty in order. Swann is a different case. Swann has been on the outside, it feels like, for quite a while. He did a bit of commentary work, still does TV. But on more than one occasion, he almost put himself out there while watching test matches where England's lack of spin options or struggles with spin, which have existed since he quit. He almost sort of asked, like, does anybody want me to help with this? Like, does anybody want a hand? I'm here. I do know how it's done. And it struck me as really, really strange that England, in their previous regime, did not look to Graeme Swann, because the spin rule was an obvious, not a void, but it was a weak point. And even the ones who came in and did okay, Dom Best did okay, Jack Leach had a decent start, but they looked like they could use a little bit of what Graeme Swann had, which was a little bit of chutzpah, a little bit of bravado, maybe a bit of something to make up and to cover the gap, because they didn't have 10 deliveries. They had a couple. But he found a way always to be in the game, to be on the attack, to not be cowed. And it's easy as a spinner to be cowed. It's really, really easy to get on the defense.
Especially an off spinner.
Sure, exactly. And it's impossible to underrate how good Graeme Swann was. He was exceptional. I think if you added Graeme Swann into this England team, it would be a huge, huge upgrade, because he was so adept at getting into the game in different ways. So England's decision to get him in the UAE and to bring him again now to Sri Lanka. And I think it's important to note he's not the spin coach. Min Patel is the spin coach. Graeme Swann is additional to that. Now, he'll talk to the spinners, of course he will. But he's there as a mentor, because he got international cricket. He got it. He understood what the game was beyond the 22 yards, and how you found a way into it, and how you settled into it, how you made life difficult for the other fella and made him feel like he shouldn't be there. And if he can work with the likes of Liam Patterson-White, Jack Carson, and show them, they were very impressed with him, I believe, in the UAE. They thought he was a real positive influence on that Lions group, and what he was saying was valuable. I would like to think he will be the same again, and I'd like to think we'll see him around the main group before long. I would love to see Graeme Swann involved in the Ashes, talking to the guys, because that is... I mean, I suppose that was his unfinished business in the end. It's not, he did well in the Ashes previously, but he ended up quitting midway because his body wouldn't allow him to continue. I think he would love to get another crack at the Aussies and to help this lot have a go.
Oh, I can absolutely vouch for that. I did a podcast with him recently. I've worked with him on many, many occasions on Test Match Special, and I think he's a fascinating appointment, because he's an appointment that wouldn't have happened before for the reasons for reasons that basically are that he's an exuberant maverick, gobby, frivolous, and I think people sometimes think, therefore, unserious man. But he's not remotely unserious. He's not remotely unserious. He's got... Look, he couldn't have been the bowler he was. He couldn't play in the England winning teams that he did, unless he was a very serious cricketer. And I think it's exactly the kind of Brendan McCullum environment that would bring him back in a way that sort of Andrew Strauss would not, if you see what I mean. There's no disrespect to Andrew Strauss, but it's about personalities and culture.
Graeme Swann is not a head boy. Graeme Swann is not a head boy. Like,
good God, no. No, he's the one who tries to undermine the head boy at all times.
Thank God for that. Because we need a bit of a mix and a combo. We've had a few head boys in the England dressing room over the years. A few too many all at once sometimes. Swann is, in the nicest and most beneficial way, he's a bit of a disruptor. He wants to challenge how it's done. Ask the captain why he hasn't got the field that he wants. Don't do that, do this. And that is very, very, very in tune with McCullum, Stokes. And I think it all chimes nicely. And if he has the space in his calendar, and if England have the freedom in that dressing room to see a bit of a maverick, I think Swann having worked with the younger guys, which is invaluable, he could still have an impression on the first team, and not just the spinners.
I couldn't agree more, and there couldn't be more of a contrast temperamentally than with Ian Bell. So the fact that there's space for both those people is very, very positive indeed, because they both have so much to give. Anyway, it's time that we skedaddled. We'll be back before long. There isn't a great deal to talk about in terms of English men's cricket, but English women's cricket's coming on. We'll probably be taking a look at the England Women's Under-19 World Cup, which has started very well for England as they move into the Super 6 stages. And we'll be looking forward, of course, to the England women's senior side as they go to South Africa for their World T20. And that takes place, or starts at least, in about 2.5 weeks or so. Thank you for listening to England Cricket on 99.94, where we speak cricket every day. Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcast. You can download the 99.94 app and follow us on Twitter at Rory, your handle.
The RVD. The cricket chap, not the wrestling chap. You know
the
that.
The RVD. I know I do, but I just love it when you say it, because you say it with such menace. You say it like you're a wrestler. And you can catch me at Norcross Cricket. Norcross Cricket, as in neither angry nor cross. And then cricket on the end, that thing that we keep on talking about every day. Never miss out. Join our 24/7 conversation on social media and follow us at 9994DM. Cricket every day, your way.